Garland Nixon in the United States. Garland, thanks very much for joining us. That's quite a brouhaha brewing in the United States. Good old culture war keeps everyone's mind off the economy and the war. Tell us, how's it all going?
Well, the Roe versus Wade decision has been very interesting in that number one, of course, jubilation in the Republican land and Republican Party. They're happy. They've been fighting for that, and they can argue that they have delivered something to their base. What is interesting is that there is a muted jubilation in the leadership of the Democratic Party. They were very concerned with the upcoming midterm elections in November. It was pretty much clear that they're facing destruction of biblical proportions, and they were pushing the January 6th so-called attempt to overthrow the government. This was going to be their plan to save themselves from political destruction. And that wasn't going well, obviously. And interestingly, now when the decision was first made, Joe Biden went to the mic, and the first thing he said was, Roe is on the ballot. So now the Democrats see this is their way to save themselves in November. This is the path to maintaining some kind of majority. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's fairly cynical to see the Democratic Party saying, "Oh, woe is me, we're upset about this," and the other side of their face has a smile saying, "Hooray, we have something that we may be able to win," without actually doing something for the working class.
But of course, President Obama and indeed President Biden could have enshrined abortion rights in law throughout the Republic at any time, but they did not.
Yes, that's the other problem that they're having, and I think that's going to grow, and that is that people who traditionally support the Democratic Party are starting to ask some uncomfortable questions. One of them, of course, being that in 2009, when Barack Obama took power, he had a veto-proof majority, a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate, so that he could have passed anything he wanted. We have the Taft-Hartley Act that a lot of us on the left were asking him to address, which would have been very good for organized labor. He didn't touch that. Of course, a lot of people brought this particular issue up. He didn't touch that. In fact, Barack Obama said this was not one of his priorities. Add to this that in 2016, Hillary Clinton ran with a senator named Tim Kaine, who was opposed to abortion. And at the time, the discussion was, well, the Democratic Party cannot exclude people who disagree with us on some issues. So people are starting to look at the Democratic Party and understanding that their record is that, as so many other things, this issue was one that was used to curry favor with the voters, to expand their base if possible, but certainly they never really acted as though they wanted to codify Roe versus Wade into law and to ensure that this wouldn't happen.
And of course, Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi are Roman Catholics in good standing. At least I often see them taking communion. And of course, they have played footsie. Pelosi just a few weeks ago was out campaigning for a Democratic candidate embroiled in a tough primary who was openly, like Tim Kaine, pro-life.
Yes, and President Biden has stated, I personally heard him state that he was opposed to abortion, but that he didn't believe that the government should be in charge and should make the decision on a woman's body. And that's all good and fine. Certainly he has a right to that. But I think what's going to hurt the Democrats over the next few months is that they are now taking the position that they have always and will always be in favor of Roe versus Wade, and that they will do anything they can to assure that a woman's right to an abortion is preserved, but their history does not support that argument. And that's what they're running into now. The questions, the videos, the comments that have been made are starting to catch up with them.
And Biden has just said he doesn't favor enlarging the membership of the court, which he could do. And Sanders, for example, his idea of rotating the membership of the Supreme Court he's set his face against both of those.
Well, the fact of the matter is this: the Supreme Court was created, the power, the authority to create the Supreme Court was given to Congress in the Constitution, but there was no specific orders as to how it would be set up. So the truth of the matter is that Congress can set the Supreme Court up any way they want to. They can change it. They can make 100 people on it, or they can make one person. It doesn't really matter. It's not set forth in the Constitution. But here's the other reality. The Democrats are arguing, basically now they're beginning to argue, you must vote for us because of Roe versus Wade. It implies that in the event that they maintain or preserve or increase their majority in November, which they have little chance of doing any of those, but it implies that if that happens, that they will somehow act on this Roe versus Wade, codify it into law, and that'll be done. But here's the reality. If they do that, they're going to have to get rid of the filibuster in the Senate. And then they can do it anytime they want if they have a majority. Well, here's the reality: they've got a majority now. So if they were going to do away with the filibuster and go ahead and codify Roe versus Wade into law, they don't have to wait until November. They could do it now. Now, they may argue that they have a couple people who won't go along with it, so they don't have the numbers. That's not going to change after November. So basically, it's, cynically, it's kind of a vote for us because of Roe versus Wade as kind of a symbolic vote to show the Republicans that you don't like this, but you're not really going to get anything out of it, and we're not going to change. It's more of the same. And I think that whatever fervor there is for supporting the Democrats right now in November, and there's not a lot, is going to die down even more as these questions become more prominent.
Let's, I don't know what polling exists, but given that nothing is ever as good or as bad as it first appears, and that's a lesson I've learned in my life, the decision of the Supreme Court is not to ban abortion, but to give to the individual states in the Union the right to have their own abortion laws. Now, the great majority of the states will presumably continue the current law. In other states that seek to, say, lower the timetable, for example, to the 12 weeks that I always voted for in Parliament, that will be testable at the ballot box. You'll be able to vote for or against that in the individual states. So the issue itself will, I think, calm down. But if the Democrats are mutedly celebrating, as you put it, that must mean that they think that the majority of people in the United States are with them. Is there evidence for that? It seems to me the US is quite a religious country at its base. How does this issue play in Peoria?
So I think that the jubilation, as I put it, at the top of the Democratic Party over this is not just about this particular issue. It's about a recognition that they are in a world of trouble, that in order to help themselves, in order to get stronger going into November, they would have to pass legislation that would be beneficial to the working class, the working poor, and the poor. And they're not going to do that because of their corporate oligarchical handlers. So they're looking for anything other than passing legislation that will benefit the working class to do this. And they see this as, kind of like a drowning man in the water that's grabbing for anything. Well, this is a floating object that they think they can pull themselves up on. I don't think it's going to work. Also, in that our economy is getting worse and worse. The biggest conversation in the U.S. now is about, gas prices, rent prices, things like that going up. So yes, there's going to be an initial splash here, but in reality, this is going to be about the economy. I do think it's going to be somewhat about Ukraine, which is inextricably linked to the economy because people are furious about the last $40 billion for Ukraine. And you hear that all the time on the streets as Americans, suffer economic woes.
Yeah, and let's turn to that, if we may. And thanks for your time, as always, Garland. He has tried, and so much so it's like a broken record, describe all that's happening in the US economy as Putin's fault, Putin's price hike and all the rest. I predicted right at the beginning, so well over 100 days ago now, that would not cut enough ice in the public mind, either here or in the United States. And that in any case, even if people did blame Putin, they can't do anything about Putin. But they can do something about Boris Johnson and Joe Biden. And in the case of Joe Biden, much more quickly in November. How is that diversion playing out?
Not very well. The numbers in the polls say I've seen numbers as low as 13% of Americans actually buy into that. The fact of the matter is that's just preaching to the choir, so that the diehard supporters of the Democratic Party would, if you told them that, they twisted their ankle and it was Putin's fault, they'd certainly go along with that. So this is not a rational argument, and it's accepted by people who aren't looking for a rational argument. But overall, I think Americans are tiring of the entire Ukraine situation. I think they want something to happen to address their economic needs. And as we both know, things are going in the opposite direction. I predict things to get much worse, to get considerably worse for the Democratic Party going into November, because we will officially, I'm sure, by then be in a recession. Another big part of the conversation is that the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates in what is said to be an attempt to lower inflation. However, as many people have argued, the inflation that we're experiencing now is a result of supply side problems. So raising the interest rates will only affect the demand, and it will push us into a recession all that much faster. So the Democratic Party is in a world of trouble, and people want something to happen to address their economic needs. And that's the neocons are in charge. They really don't care about domestic policy.
Roll on November. Garland Nixon, who guides us along the way on all matters American. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.